The B-17, a colossus of the skies with its 4 imposing engines, emerged as the backbone of the Allied heavy bombers in World War II. This winged monster, meticulously designed for strategic bombing at high altitudes, could unleash destruction over vast distances with terrifying precision. Armed to the teeth with 13 machine guns, distributed like sentinels along its fuselage, the B-17 did not earn its nickname, Flying Fortress, for nothing. It was a fortress of steel, capable of withstanding unimaginable damage and still returning to base. But the technical greatness of the B-17 concealed a dark and brutal reality. Each mission was not just a challenge, it was a plunge into the abyss of war. The courageous crew members who ventured into the bowels of this machine faced indescribable horrors. The biting cold of high altitudes, the deafening noise, the relentless attacks from enemy forces. It was an experience of extreme danger and unimaginable discomfort. Each flight was a journey into hell itself, and those who managed to return did so marked by the intensity of their ordeal. Today, we will delve into the depths of danger that the crews of these winged machines faced on missions that bordered on suicide. When the B-17 bomber emerged in the fog of World War II, it shone as a technological marvel, a giant of the skies, impressive and imposing. Its grandeur was unquestionable, larger and more advanced than any other aircraft of its time. But for the crew, every moment aboard was a trial. Some positions within the plane were purely terrifying. Operating at altitudes of 18,000 feet, the B-17 was not pressurized. At this altitude, oxygen was a luxury absent, forcing the crew to use oxygen masks. And due to temperatures that could drop to less than 60 degrees inside the aircraft, they had to wear electrically heated flight suits to stay warm. In case of injury, blood exuded would literally freeze upon contact with the chilly air, sometimes saving a soldier from bleeding to death. This technology, however, sometimes failed. Suits that malfunctioned or were damaged meant mortal danger, and a crew member, without immediate assistance, could perish within minutes. The crews wore gloves to prevent their skin from being torn off when touching any bare, icy surface. Gunners, while trying to clear jammed machine guns, often paid the price with fingers amputated by the extreme cold. Many succumbed to frostbite. The B-17, known for its stability, had specific tactics of flying in tight formation for mutual protection against enemy fighters. This formation allowed overlapping fields of fire, creating a protective mesh of machine guns against attacks. The greatest danger came from enemy anti-aircraft fire, but some positions inside the aircraft were equally terrifying, even without the presence of the enemy. The German air defense was extremely effective, and their anti-aircraft guns and fighter pilots shot down many B-17s. The 88mm Flak gun, famous for its accuracy and destructive power, was a deadly threat not only to planes but even to tanks. These guns could fire projectiles at altitudes of up to 30,000 feet, well within the cruising altitude of the B-17. Heavily concentrated around strategic targets, such as large factories and crucial cities, Flak projectiles were programmed to explode at a specific altitude, spreading shrapnel in a wide radius. Although a direct hit was devastating, the B-17 did not need to be hit directly to suffer serious damage. The aluminum fuselage could be pierced by nearby explosions, causing devastating damage or incapacitating the crew. The psychological pressure was intense. Crews never knew when they would encounter a flak cloud or if they would be hit. Seeing friendly aircraft being shot down, often exploding in the air if bombs or fuel were hit, without any parachutes opening, was brutal. In addition, there were German fighters. Models like the Messerschmitt Bf 109 and the Focke-Wulf 190 were alerted by radar stations and launched to intercept bomber formations, attacking in coordinated waves. They used frontal attack tactics to target the cockpit and engines, as well as rear and side attacks to exploit blind spots. Equipped with 20 or 30mm cannons and 7.92 or 13mm machine guns, these fighters could inflict severe damage on B-17s. Initially, the Allies underestimated the need for escort, believing that the 13 machine guns of the B-17 would provide sufficient protection against enemy fighters. However, this proved inaccurate. At the beginning of the war, Allied escort fighters did not have the same range as the B-17s and could not accompany them throughout the entire mission. It was only with the introduction of long-range fighters, such as the P-51 Mustang, that bomber escorts became viable, significantly reducing losses. The B-17 crew, composed of 10 members, operated in a confined environment. The cockpit was small, with a low ceiling, requiring the crew to sometimes crawl through the aircraft. The tail gunner, responsible for rear protection, sat in an improvised and half-kneeling seat during missions, in an extremely tight space. However, perhaps the most terrifying position was that of the waist gunner. Maneuvering twin .50 caliber machine guns mounted in waist windows on both sides of the aircraft, they operated in a confined space with no seating positions, standing or kneeling while leaning on the machine guns to aim and fire. The waist windows of the B-17 were open to allow for a wide field of fire, exposing the gunners to extreme cold conditions and providing minimal, almost non-existent protection against enemy fire. Furthermore, in the event of collisions with other aircraft or forced landings with damaged landing gear, the ball turret gunner could be crushed to death. The top turret, located just behind the cockpit, offered a 360-degree view that, although advantageous, made the gunner highly visible and therefore a prime target for enemy fighters. The situation of the ball turret gunner, however, was even more disturbing. Positioned in the bottom of the aircraft, they were in a tight and claustrophobic space, isolated from the rest of the crew. The ejection of the ball turret required hydraulic alignment to position the turret door with the crew compartment. If the hydraulics were damaged, the gunner could be trapped, with no chance of escape. In addition to these gunners, the B-17 crew included a pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, and radio operator, all working in precise synchronization. But what happened when the plane was hit? If the aircraft was still relatively controllable, the crew would quickly assess the damage and decide on the next steps. The preferred option was to try to maintain control and return to base, or at least friendly lines for a forced landing. Many planes, however, crashed into the sea before being able to return. In extreme cases, some B-17s managed to return to base with only 2 of the 4 engines working, which in itself was a remarkable feat. If the damage was too severe, the pilot would order the crew to abandon the aircraft. The crew would quickly grab and prepare their parachutes, heading to the nearest exits and helping each other evacuate. If they jumped over enemy territory, they were usually captured and interned as prisoners of war. In the Pacific theater, captured aviators often faced horrific fates, with many dying under the worst conditions in captivity. In situations of catastrophic damage, the aircraft could fall so rapidly that the crew didn't even have a chance to eject and use their parachutes. These final moments were tragically common and exemplified the extreme danger that B-17 crews faced on every mission.